And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to the Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. I'm Dennis Fithian, and we're ready to get things underway on this Wednesday, July the 9th. The answer is always, it's always a good time to talk about Michigan football. That's what we are going to do today. Very happy to be here. Part of On Three Rivals, the Maize and Blue Review. Come join us over there. You're thinking, man, I want to hear all about Michigan. I want to talk about Michigan. That's what we're all about. Check us out, the Maize and Blue Review on Three Rivals. As for today, I have put down 5 keys to making the playoffs in college football. Will Michigan make the playoffs? I'll give you the keys. You can decide for yourself. Meanwhile, basketball, they continue to stay in the news. Dusty landing his first player for 2026, and he's a big Dane from Denmark. We'll get to him, the comparisons, and just how things are going for Mr. May in July. But let's start off looking at the calendar. That's what I was doing today, thinking about, well, how many days is it? A lot of times, I think it was Vince who used to come on here and he would say, oh, yeah, there's this many days until the start of the season, that kind of thing. But I haven't seen Vince. But maybe he only shows up when it gets to be like 40 days and he starts giving the countdown. I did see that the unofficial start to the college football season to really kick things off. And it's really just put there, and people say it because they want to get, they want to believe that it's closer than it is. And that is the Big Ten Media Days, where, the assembled media say, okay, now it's ready. Now it's the unofficial start. And I'm fine with it. You put up anything to try to get it going. And that is only 2 weeks away, where they'll make the trip. We'll see how many people make the trip. When it was driving distance to Chicago, maybe Indianapolis a few times, sure, you're going to make that trip. Driving to Las Vegas, that's not going to happen. So we'll see how many people end up showing up. There'll be a strong West Coast contingent maybe this time around for media days that they split up in the 3 days. But it's the unofficial start to the college football season. I guess you have to have some of those. In 3 weeks, that's when camp is going to start for Michigan. Now, there's always someone who'll say, no, it's actually this day, and this is a day they report. And I'm always like, fine with that. You end up getting the official date. That's great. A real easy way to know when Michigan reports for camp is just look at when their opener is. This year, it is on August the 30th, and just go back 4 weeks, which ends up being August the 2nd. And I would think that Michigan in and around August the 2nd would be reporting for camp. But like I said, some people get worked up about that because it might not be right on the 2nd. They might report on the 1st. They might even come in that weekend. They used to have the freshmen for a day and then the upperclassmen. So that kind of stuff can change. But it is around 3 weeks away where they will be reporting for camp. So you got 2 weeks, the unofficial start, 3 weeks, actual Michigan going out there and practicing. And if you're counting it down to August 30th, today is the 9th. And so you got 21 days left. And then you tack on the 30, and I think you come up with 52 days away from the start of the season for Michigan. So all of that, and those are some of the numbers, if I'm counting down to kickoff, that I'm keeping in mind. Those are the ones. I did take a look even at I was looking at the college football schedule today, Michigan schedule, the week 0 schedule, the Labor Day schedule. The Labor Day weekend schedule is tremendous. It has been that way for years now. It rivals the first 4 days, the first official 4 days of the college football, or I'm sorry, the college basketball tournament, the Thursday through Sunday, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I think you'll put a little Monday on there. They'll give you a game 5 days in a row. It rivals it. It's great every year. I like how Michigan State has their Friday game, and then the big day where everybody's playing, almost everyone, on Saturday. But then the week before they started, it's been a few years, 4 or 5 years, where they've gone to week 0, and not too shabby. There's 2 games. They I guess it's an annual game now that they do in Dublin, Iowa State, Kansas State. I could see checking out a little bit of that one. And then I saw UNLV was playing that day as well. And normally I wouldn't be drawn to UNLV football playing, but if Alex Orji is going to be the quarterback, I wouldn't mind seeing what Alex Orji looks like as a running Rebel on week 0. So I'll do that. It's just like those you get that Thursday games that you would not otherwise watch if they were on a Saturday, because there's so many games. You get a chance if they spread it out where you can end up watching it. So the date that I'm looking at and I was thinking about for Michigan, they kick off on August the 30th. The Monday game week is going to be the 25th. And there are certain things that I want to hear from Sherrone Moore. I thought he messed it up last year with how he played out his cards as a first-year head coach on that Monday for game week. And whoever his advisors are and how he felt about it, whether he had some gamesmanship. Hopefully he's learned his lesson when it comes down to what he's going to say, who the starters are, that kind of stuff. I would expect on that Monday that you will hear that Bryce Underwood is going to be the starting quarterback. I would also, there's a couple different key positions that are up for grabs. Yeah. And one of them would be left tackle. Now, I really don't care if it's Evan Link, if it's a true freshman and Andrew Babalola, but what I would like is Sherrone Moore, when he is asked on that Monday, he's going to try to keep everything close to the vest for New Mexico so they don't have any advantage and everything. And I think that's part of it. The other part is that coaches like being coy just to do it, or whatever, right? But last year when he got up there and they're like, "Hey, who's your quarterback?" And he's like, "The competition's ongoing." No, you don't want your team to think that. You don't want the players. You want the players, the 3 weeks prior. You want to fight it out. You want to divvy up the snap. You want to do all those things. Go ahead. You're the coach. You know best. But when you get to game week and you have to start taking these starting reps, splitting them up, continuing some sort of competition in a game week, is not something that I would do. In all of my experience and watching all these coaches do it for years, I know these guys, they get all the data and science and recommend all these things, and then they have to be themselves. But that's one thing that they should do. The team wants to know who the quarterback is. The team wants to know who the starters are game week. They don't want to be fooling around, even if the coach is trying to be tricky or not. You got to focus in and dial it in on the opener. So that is just something you might just even call. I don't think it's more than a pet peeve. It's because if it's a pet peeve, it's almost like it doesn't matter. I think it does matter, so I wouldn't be spending time on it. So just something to think about on that Monday as it happens. And so those are the countdown things that I am thinking about as we get ready for August the 30th. I like reading feedback during the show as it happens. People come up with what's on their mind in July. Some people, like John, who is taking a picture from the end zone, is just wanting to say hi. U of M saying good afternoon. Also saying that single game tickets went on sale yesterday. That was not something that I was aware of. Hadley says Dennis seems to be having some technical difficulties. Well, anyways, go blue. I did end up having some technical difficulties. You're right, Hadley. You know, I got a new camera here in the studio. And the first time that I plugged it in, it's been about 3 weeks. The first time I plugged it in, it was on, and it worked. It was perfect and everything. There was no hitches, anything. And I kind of forgot about it. But then over these last 2 weeks, I've been getting some issues with it and saying it doesn't support it, shut other things down. I'm like, I don't have anything else on. And then it wants me to restart my computer. So then I'm sitting around here waiting. Yeah, I have to work on that. I have to tell you, there's one or two things that are happening. The camera is on, and it seems like the camera is fine. But I think my old camera was just pretty good. It was a pretty good camera because the new one, I thought it was going to be like, whoa, like when you went from watching whatever it was, regular cable TV, and then they put in high def. Those of you, I guess we can say that are old enough to remember that. It was such a great time. It was such a great time in sports viewing. And it seemed like some of the channels, it might even still seem like that, but CBS football, when they put the high def on there, when I was watching just the regular TV and they put the high def on there, I thought, all right, maybe I have died. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the start where they say, how do you like heaven? I'm in. I really like it. I like this. This is great. This is actually like just being at the game and just watching it in a 70-inch rectangle. I'm all set. Thank you. I've made it. What a time that was to be alive, to make the transition. It was it as big when they had just black and white, and then you got a color TV? It was like, wow. Probably color was better, but I don't know. High def was pretty good. High def was that was it. So I don't know. The camera seems like it's pretty good, but it's also giving me some issues. So maybe I'll just go back to the old one. Urabi, I wonder if I say that name right. That's the way I've been saying it. Asking me if I'm going to any games this year. You know, that's a very good question, and one that, you know, for 25 years I went to so many games. If I wasn't going to Michigan games, then when I went to Detroit, I was going to Lions games, and I went to hundreds of Tigers and Red Wings and Pistons games. And then when the pandemic came, I stopped going to games. And I went to a couple of Michigan hockey games. I went to a couple of Michigan spring games. This last year, I traveled to Madison to work with the hockey team, and I got the blood kind of coursing back through the veins. Like, man, being at the games is really something. And so the answer to that question is I am planning on going to the games this year. Josh Henschke, the publisher of the Maize and Blue Review, has tapped me on the shoulder and said, let's get you out to the games. It's going to help the podcast more. Yeah, you go to the Monday news conferences. Why not go to the game? See what you can find out there and being able to watch it. And I like it. I like the perspective. You know, sometimes you get to pick, you know, how you're going to do things, and it's just smooth sailing. Other times it's kind of made for you. That's kind of what happened to me. But here's my thing. The first 11 years in working and covering Michigan and going to the games, it really was everything that you could imagine. it was heaven on earth. Going to Michigan Stadium, going to the press box, going to away games, covering the team. It was like, wow. And then it was cut. And then I went to Detroit, and then it was like, go to the Lions games. I'm like, this isn't going to be the same. But, going to pro games was then for 14 years. I went to pro game, went to the Lions games. I still went to some Michigan games, just not as many, one or two. And then when I did go, it was like, man, this is great to be back. But now I'm not going at all, really. Like I said, for 5 years. To be able to go back now, all of that memory and that appreciation. I don't know. People say when they go, they're always like, "Oh, I really appreciate being here." But to tell you the truth, there's a lot of people that work the games that are there that are like, "Oh, there's a lot of complaining going on." But my point there is, it's been a while, and to be able to go back, it's the number one thing about covering Michigan when you look at the benefits. One of them is going to the games. And so to be able to do that and go back, I'll have is it a newfound appreciation, a refresh, a new appreciation, yeah. I think it's going to be good. I'm gonna can't wait for the opener. Yes, so the opener, I'll be there. Ipsy Brent. Let's go. Mustafa says, let it rip with Bryce. He's taking the majority of the snacks during the spring. Either way. Yarabi. I was pretty close, huh? My question is, and this might be a little bit inside, but here's Hadley. Hadley, there's a Mustafa that called into the radio when I during the pandemic. I did a little radio back in Ann Arbor, and there was Mustafa who walked along the bridge, and he would look into Michigan practice, and once in a while they would come up to him and say, "Hey, hurry along here." Now they've built up. I don't think they care if you stop, even if you have binoculars on. I don't think you can see into the practice fields at all. But it was a very entertaining call always when Mustafa. Because I would always ask him about, when the last time he was on the bridge, what did he see? And, here's Hadley who would know. Maybe you need to ask Hadley and find out if that's the case or not. Well, Yarabi is asking about Michigan and letting it rip with Bryce. And I was asking myself this question today. And here are the 5 things that I'm going to be talking about when it comes to Michigan and the keys to the season. And I have Underwood up there at 1. And I think it's going to be Underwood. But I thought, what if it wasn't Underwood? Would I still be, all of you have to ask yourself this question. Oh, Michigan's going to go 11-1. Michigan's definitely making the playoffs. But then it's followed by, Bryce, because Bryce, is the quarterback. Would you feel the same way right now? Or next month at this time, if it came out that, Bryce, he's only 17, it's probably going to be best for him. Mikey Keene has really, he's just mastered the offense, just knows the offense so much better. It's going to be best for Michigan to start out with Keene. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm giving you a for instance. What about that, for instance? Would you feel the same way about Michigan if it was Keene? And I asked myself that question. I said, I would not feel the same way. But you have to do some gymnastics there, because last year there is a narrative by a lot of people. I might even said it myself. If Michigan got just average quarterback play, they might have been able to beat Washington, Illinois. Some people like to throw in Indiana in there. I think they might have won one of those games. You could say, people like to say all three. Who knows? If they had a quarterback, maybe they wouldn't have won against USC because when they were 80 yards and whatever they would have gone, they would have gone to a 2-minute offense, not just handing it off before Khalil Mack. Who knows? But you get back to Underwood, and as much as I look at it, and as much as I talk about it, you study it and you realize that, yeah, he's going to need help. He's got, it's not all on his shoulders. Michigan does want to run the ball more than your average team. Yeah, I think we can all agree about that. And then Michigan's defense, it might not be as good as last year, but it looks pretty good. You start going through it, those edges, what they have, and they can be a very formidable, I'd say certainly on a top 20 defense, maybe top 15, outside shot to be top 10. But they were close to a top 5 defense last year. So it's just a little bit, just a little bit of a step back without Mason Graham, without Kenneth Grant, others. Will Johnson, I know that he was out for most of the year, but you get the point when it comes down to that. Having a strong defense, having a running game, it's not as much on a true freshman quarterback as it might be at other places. And yet, if Michigan is going to be the best version of themselves, having Underwood from day one learning and then having him take the climb, and then he'll have a little bit of, then take the climb, and then it's to be the best version of themselves. I'm thinking I can't get away from it. The more I look at it, the more I think about it, that it has to be Underwood. And the reason that I think that there'll be, some stumbles along the way, because the kid is just 17 and as dynamic as he might be, he's going to have some issues here or there that probably, with the team around him, will probably cost him a game or two. And you might not like to think about that kind of stuff in July, but I was thinking about Michigan's national championship season. It didn't actually go just perfectly, although, they ended up being perfect. So you'd say, what are you talking about? What I would talk about is week 2. This year, Michigan plays at Oklahoma in week 2. And in week 2 of the national championship season, Michigan was without Jim Harbaugh. Sherrone Moore was the head coach, but they played Bowling Green. And Michigan's quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who threw a couple picks in the against TCU in the playoff game the year before, he threw 3 picks in week 2 in the national championship season, and it was a pretty close game. It was like 14-6. I'd have to go back and look, but it's pretty close, single digits. And if JJ can throw 3 picks against Bowling Green, could Underwood at Oklahoma throw a couple picks? And yeah, I mean, that is in the realm of possibility. I almost think, I don't know, should I say that you should expect there's going to be a game or two that Underwood probably throws away, that he has a McCarthy game, whether it was against TCU, although JJ, other than the 2 picks, he was pretty good that game, whipping the ball around. But there's a bunch of other stuff that went on there as well. But those 2 picks were pretty big as well. Now, pick 6, boom, one was a pick 6. So yeah, Underwood, a big key. This is one of these, when I put these 5 things up there, you can pick 5 anything. You can pick 5 players, you can pick 5 coaches. I zoomed in on Underwood, I zoomed back on the coaches, I zoomed in to a position group. I pulled back and looked at an entire side of the ball, and then I went back onto the offensive side of the ball and looked at another position group. But Underwood, number 1 as a key for this upcoming season. And I think he's going to start, and I think he's going to be pretty good, but I think there's going to be some bumps along the way. The coaches, what kind of game plan is Chip Lindsey and Sherrone Moore going to put for Underwood? Are these guys going to say, yeah, we really need to be conservative with Underwood in the early going? I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say no. If you're going to have him there and you're going to have your game plan, you can't tiptoe down to Norman, even though you have a freshman quarterback and hostile night game. All the world's eyes are going to be on him, expecting everything. You still have to allow him to make some plays. It reminds me of 2004. We didn't find out to the morning of that it was going to be Chad Henne was going to be the starter. And Henne started, and then but game 2 was at Notre Dame as a true freshman for Chad Henne. And I put up the warning signs to everybody that week and said, look, Lloyd Carr is going to crawl. He's crawling into a shell. He's in a shell. He is not going to allow Chad Henne to do it. He is so worried about a true freshman out there that Michigan has put themselves behind the 8 ball because he is going to go ultra conservative, and that could end up costing Michigan. Now, they did lose that game. And part of it, watching it, they had to settle for a bunch of field goals, but it was also, you didn't have, Chad Henne didn't lose it, but he also didn't win it either. It was an ultra conservative game plan. So, yeah, you want to protect your quarterback. You want to do all those things, but I actually feel good about Sherrone Moore. He doesn't crawl into a shell. He has shown that he'll go out there, and not that he's willy-nilly and throwing caution to the wind or anything, but I think he'll allow Underwood to do some things where I'm not as worried as I was about Carr back in the day that I am about Sherrone Moore. And I don't know what Chip Lindsey's thinking, but Sherrone Moore can say, hey, we're not going out like that. If we're gonna lose by playing to our strengths. And yeah, it's gonna be running the ball, it's gonna be defense, but it's also gonna be Underwood being able to do what he can do. Whatever that's gonna be. We're gonna do it. We're not gonna hold back because he's just playing his first road game ever and he just turned 18. So I feel good in that aspect as a key from the coaches. Now, the offensive line and Underwood, rightfully so. When anybody talks about Michigan, it's going to be about, well, can't wait to see what Bryce Underwood's all about. Sure, that's what happens. Quarterback, and you're right. But the offensive line for Michigan, if we go back to 2021, that night game against Washington, when everything got going with Harbaugh and where they would, rip off 3 straight Big Ten championships there. It started that night game against Washington and the ground and pound. But it started with the offensive line being featured. It wasn't Cade McNamara, and it was the offensive line who went on to be named, the Sherrone Moore offensive line Sherrone Moore offensive line for 2 years in a row. And then in the third year, in the last few games, they took off. They probably should have won 3 Joe Sherrone Moore offensive lines awards in a row. The point here is that the offensive line, you look over at left tackle, I don't care if it's Evan Link or Babaloa or if they've got somebody else in mind, but I would like them to nail that down. And if you're going to be a little bit worried about starting a true freshman quarterback, well, starting a true freshman left tackle might be something that you'd be, woo, boy, okay, very talented, very young, let's go. But how they handle that, so the offensive line, of course, is key. It's a key to every team. But for Michigan and the quarterback, don't know much about left tackle, how it's going to shake out. The left guard was the right guard last year. That should be okay. Crippen was mostly the center last year. Right guard, the competition is ongoing. If we had to make a guess right now, Nathan Afobe would be the guy. Okay. And then Sprague, who did start the ReliaQuest Bowl. Everybody feels good about him. Seems like he's going to be the next great tackle. But the offensive line, clearly a key, not talked about as much, of course, as Underwood, but should be talked about pretty quickly when it comes down to Michigan and their chances this year of making the playoffs. Now, the defense is just like the line. Michigan, their defense over these past few years has been tremendous. They had some growing pains with Wink out of the gate last year. When they got tuned up by Texas when it was 24-3 at half. I thought, wow, is Wink really the right guy? Just like everyone else. I read enough stories where you had people that break down the numbers. I don't know, wherever they break them down themselves, or Pro Football Focus, that too much blitzing, dangerous blitzing, danger with Wink. Those same people that were crying at their keyboards week 2 were some of the same ones, 10 weeks later, they were Wink, that he was able to turn things around and put it together and put together the masterpiece in Columbus, holding Ohio State to under 80 yards rushing, held Ohio State to, 10 points? They shut out Ohio State in the second half. That really was a masterpiece. Absolute masterpiece. It comes down to it. So, yeah, the defense. Well, I don't think it's going to be as good as last year. I think it's still going to be pretty good. Key, of course, to this season. And then these wide receivers. We talk about the wide receivers a lot. We talk about wide receivers in recruiting. Talk about the wide receivers on the team. We look at the wide receivers that were here last year, and people are like, they need new wide receivers. And then the wide receivers that came in and that were totally featured, along with Underwood and Jaden Davis in the spring game, they didn't have good spring games. And Jamar Browder dropped one in the end zone. Yeah, it would have been a tough catch. I mean, you're supposed to make the tough catches to be a big-time wideout. Doesn't mean he can't. It was like Fred Moore was going on the sideline. One, bounced off his chin. It happens. But when it's the only time that we watch him, because they're the clips that we see that they put out, they're not showing guys drop the ball or whatever else. I understand that. But then Browder, the other one, down the sideline. Oh, big time throw, just a little wet. Didn't catch that one either. So they've got a bunch of wideouts. They need a couple guys to step up. McCulley, yeah, we're expecting him to be the go-to, the number one. Expecting him to be everything. McCulley. But the wide receivers clearly are key. Being able to, and I said it during the spring game, after the spring game, that Underwood looked like a 17-year-old, the delay of games, a little fumble here, wasn't really able to connect when he had a big-time deep throw, missed it by, 5-6 yards, missed some other ones, threw a pick, miscommunication, whatever it was there. It wasn't a real wow performance. Did a nice job hitting some short passes. Good job. Wasn't like a disaster or anything, but my point with this is if those wide receivers, if you get Browder who comes up with one or two of those, it's a different story. You're like, ooh, Underwood's ready right off the bat. How amazing was that? So the wide receivers. So to recap, I think we're all on the same page when it comes down to keys for the season. I asked you the question about, would you feel the same about Michigan's outlook this year if it was Keene other than Underwood? You probably would. I would not. I say you probably would because, heck, Michigan could come out with Jake Garcia and somehow announce that he's going to be the quarterback, and Michigan fans would be like, yeah, this kid must be awesome. Because you're just going to roll with Michigan. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with rolling with the maize and blue. Underwood, the coaches, their game plan, how they're going to go about things. How is Sherrone? We'll see August the 25th when he gets in front of the media for game week. Is he going to be different than he was last year? Hopefully. Is Chip Lindsey going to give the keys to the car to Underwood? Not that they have to throw it 40 times, even 30 times, but are they going to dumb down the game plan for Underwood in Norman, in Lincoln? Seems like that's going to be a big key. Of course, the offensive line doesn't get as much talk. People just like, oh, the offensive line's, it's Michigan. Well, it's Michigan. Look what they've been doing. Sherrone Moore was an offensive line coach. I think those were all actually good points. But the exception is that, okay, yeah, we just don't know who it's going to be. And it could be a true freshman. Just get ready for it. So the O-line, the defense made that point, and then just talked about the wide receivers. Before I get to basketball, let's get back and look at some of the feedback to see where people are at. James loves the Maize and Blue review. Says he knows this is off topic, but can you guys bring back the college football video game Michigan Dynasty, please? I miss when Josh used to play. I'd love to see him play the new EA Sports College Football 26. I will ask that question. That is off topic, but I will get that to Mr. Henschke and ask him that question. I know he tried to do some different things. That wasn't during the game. I remember during the game he was doing like a talk show during the game. That was at Hadley, talking about, am I planning a get together? You know, I'm ready for a get together. That's what I need, Hadley. Somebody get the ball rolling here. I need to go out and hit a couple restaurants and say, let's get it going. Mustafa says Scars, making a lot of sense with the logic behind starting Bryce right away. Yeah, you know, if you don't, it's the first time I was thinking of bring him along slow. You know, that thought. If you're bringing him along slow, so that means you're starting Keen. And if you just walk through it, all right, you know, Bryce will play, then you'll see him against New Mexico. I could take some Garrison could get some snaps. Wouldn't want to see that. But I could take some snaps against New Mexico. They could put Jaden Hood at quarterback for New Mexico. Michigan's going to win that game. So you would see a little bit of Bryce Underwood. But are you going to see any of Bryce Underwood if they start Mikey Keene in game number 2? No. You would not see him. Against CMU, again, you'd see him in the second half. Hey, there's Underwood. There's a couple snaps. And the way things work, at least since I've watched Michigan and almost every other team, you would say, let's see him in the second quarter. Let's see him to start the second half. Let's see him early in the third. What happens is the game's got to be like 30-3 into the fourth quarter. Here comes Bryce Underwood. It's almost always like that. So then you get to the road against Nebraska. He's not playing in that game. They got a bye week against Wisconsin. So, you know, if Keene is performing admirably, you're not going to see Bryce Underwood. Unless you're going to do some of that sprinkling them in like, Harbaugh would do. Harbaugh, that first year that McCarthy, he played, but it would be a game against Wisconsin, start the second quarter. Oh, here's JJ. Oh, JJ hands it off. He's out. Oh, here's JJ. Will come in and he'll scramble. He did have a big package. McCarthy had a pretty good package to play against Michigan State as a true freshman. You can make the case he had a big, and I would make it too, had a big hand in them losing that game. But that's the thing. If it was Underwood and you were going to bring him along slowly, you are not going to see, unless the season nosedives, which that's the part where you think about get Underwood. He's He was there all spring, so it was kind of a blessing in disguise that Keene wasn't ready. You hope Keene's going to be good to go and everything else, but get him out there, get him all those reps against New Mexico. Let's just give him the best chance against Oklahoma. Get him all those reps against Central. Then get him ready for that first road game against Nebraska. Now, you could say, what if they lose 2 of those first 4 games? I think that is in the realm of possibility. Would they go to then, Keene? Probably not. Probably not. They would go to Underwood quicker than they would go to Keene. I think we pretty good to say that. Pretty easily to say that. Schedule sets up. Sure it does. Confidence is high with the defense. Here he is. The golfer. And Andres, what's he doing there? Is he planting his flag in Ohio? Is that what he's doing? 45-23. Yes, I think that's exactly what he's doing. He's Michigan, the state of Ohio is maize and blue. And Andres is planting his flag. I'm in on that. There's Rip. So it's good to see him. Win, win, win. Let's go. JB is going to the opener. He's also going to Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Washington, Northwestern, hopefully OSU, because I'm 3-0 against OSU when attending. Well, hey, JB, I think we would all also like to see you go to the game as well with that kind of record. That's it. I'm just going on what I hear, Rip. That's what some people have told me when it comes down to it. I knew as I was saying it, but I tried not to draw any attention to myself, and then here I am drawing attention to myself. A coach who is drawing a lot of attention to not only himself, but his team in thinking about big packages. Think about Denmark and think about Dusty May, who has pulled in a gigantic center for the first commitment to the class of 2026, and his name is Marcus Moller, and he is 7'3", and he committed to Michigan this week. That is Dusty going out there and grabbing his first commitment of 26. Now, I've talked a lot about the USA under-19 team that Morris Johnson Jr. played, the 7 games over in Switzerland. And Rez Johnson looked awesome, and it was a lot of good news for Michigan, the way that he played. There's a center for Purdue who played 2 games for the Boilers last year, got hurt. He goes like 7'3". He might even be 7'4". But he's built a lot like Moller. But his name is Daniel Jacobson. Morez Johnson took his spot. The first game that they played in Switzerland was against Australia. Morez Johnson had a double-double. They put him into the starting lineup, and he was here for the rest of the time. But Jacobson would come off the bench, and they would throw it into the big fella, and he would go to a right hook. He would go to a left hook. He'd go to an underneath. Jam. He was just a potent offensive weapon off the bench for Team USA. I watched 5 minutes of Marcus Moller, and he reminds me very much of Daniel Jacobson. Very skilled around the basket. You see some of these hook shots, you see some of these up and under, a lot of dunks. Don't have to jump very high, about like this. Boom, slamming it down, shooting some threes out there. If he can get stronger, he can put on some weight. I could see him being a very nice player for Michigan. You can see what they like about him, no doubt. But it's now a trend. It's like in the football space for Sherrone Moore when he said, I like bigger wide receivers, when he was talking about Jamar Browder, big wide receiver. And then they, Zion Robinson, the Travis Johnson, he likes bigger wide receivers. You can see that. Donovan McCulley, he's recruiting that way, whether it's the portal or high school. And then Dusty, I don't know if Dusty's like, I like 7-footers. I guess with the question, the point with who doesn't like, 7-footers in basketball. But you just look at this upcoming season. I put their names. This one's cut off. That's Yaxel. That's Yaxel Lendenborg right there. That's up on the top. And Yaxel, you can say, well, he's not a 7-footer. He's 6'9", but he's got a 7'4" wingspan. So, yeah, he is kind of like a 7-footer. And he could play the 5 for Michigan. Morez Johnson Jr., who I just talked about, he's 6'9", but he's got a 7'2" wingspan. Pictured against Morez Johnson just this week, Michigan with a little practice going on over at the Chrysler Center. You have Andy Mara, the transfer from UCLA, listed at 7'2". He's got a 7'6" wingspan. And then the German center, who's 21 years old and who just took up basketball. He was a skilled handball player over in Germany. Handball, basketball, athleticism, whatever. I don't know. They have some different sports over there. I remember seeing England. They got a lot of different cricket and stuff, but they have a game like basketball, but there's no rim. They just got a ring and a pole, but they can't dribble the ball. I don't even remember how did they shoot it in? I was like, these guys, what do they call that? They call it ring ball. Nah, it wasn't very interesting to me. I'm like, get a backboard up there. Was it mostly a sport that women played? I don't know. But there's the idea. If Dusty doesn't like necessarily 7-footers, he likes wings. He likes a nice reach of the 7-footers. That's it. We've seen it. Chug that Borg. Yeah, let's do it. So that's where I'm at. If you got any questions, you got any points, now would be a great time to go ahead and put them in. What I am looking at for the rest of July is that it's you could make a case that you do have a little bit of downtime here, but what we have in Michigan is we have a baseball team that is incredible, that is just, running away with things. And I get that some of the off seasons can be longer than others. And, but when the Tigers are good, the off season goes like that. And then I was looking at the schedule. The Tigers are going to be here. The Tigers are going to be there. But the Tigers have such a big lead, and they're putting everybody in their rearview mirror. And that, yeah, sure, they're playing the same around the same time as the Michigan opener, and the same time that Michigan would be down at Oklahoma. But the Tigers are going to have a double-digit lead. It just so happens that their bye week, if they were playing in the wild card, would have been perfect to watch the Tigers. But the Tigers are not going to be in the wild card. They're going to get one of the top two. They're going to get a bye. So they'll be in the divisional series, which you're going to have then some, situation where it could be down playoff baseball, Michigan football. I know it's an easy decision for a lot of folks. I go back to my memory of 2006, and Michigan was pretty good in 2006. I was in Detroit covering the Detroit Tigers. And it was a lot of fun. And then football season started. And there were a few times being down there at a Saturday baseball game, even though the Tigers were good, that I was like, I'd rather be in Ann Arbor. And then Michigan was playing Michigan State that week, and I thought I'd rather be in Ann Arbor. But then the Tigers had a chance to clinch. It was a Saturday, Michigan State, Saturday, game 4, Tigers and Yankees. Tigers had Jeremy Bonderman on the mound, and I was sitting down there at the ballpark, and I said, you know what? I would rather, it was weird. I'd rather be at Comerica. That was a clinching baseball, and they won. But shows you what can happen when you get a team doing what the Tigers are doing. That's it. Or you can be like Colin, and you can watch both. And that's the way to do it. And if you recall, my approach on that, Colin, is that I like having 2 TVs. I looked at the Labor Day weekend on the Thursday games. Both Wisconsin and Nebraska are playing at 9 o'clock on that Thursday. Now, if they could have said, hey, how would you order it up? I would have one of them play at 4 and one of them play at 8. But they're both playing at 9 o'clock. But it's not going to be that bad. You have Nebraska on one and Wisconsin on the other. Michigan plays both of those teams in back-to-back weeks, in week 4 and they'll have a bye, so week 6, but they play them back-to-back. So, watching those 2 teams to see what they look like is probably something you're going to do on week 0, kicking off Labor Day weekend. But yeah, the 2 TVs. One TV goes to the commercial. Boom, let's go over to the other one. No fun when you have 2 TVs and you get them both going on the commercial. But when you get 4 or 5 games, to me, it's difficult. Even though I am able to see and work through it, I can, but it's just afterwards. I'll have watched 5 or 6 games. They're all on. I'm going to say, well, what did you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know what to think. I don't know. So call it a weakness. Call it whatever you want. Say I like turtles. I don't know what that means. But that'll do it. Thanks so much. We'll see you over on the Maize and Blue Review. We're talking about all of these things, talking a lot about the Tigers over there as well. Even 98% of it. Let's say 97% will be about Michigan, a little bit about the Tigers, a little bit about something else, movies or something, but mostly Michigan. So if that sounds good to you, well, we'll see you over there. On 3 Rivals, Maize and Blue Review. Dennis Fithian, so long. Thanks for staying with us, and we'll talk with you on Friday.